Here is a certain sound that can reach deeper into the human mind than any other. It is not a song, not a whisper, not even a secret. It is a name. Her name. When a man speaks it in a certain way, with a certain rhythm, the mind reacts before she can even think about it. Every cell in her body recognizes it, because a name is not just a label. It is an identity. It is everything she believes herself to be, compressed into a single word. That is why, in the shadows of psychology, a name can be used not only to gain attention, but to create desire so deep it feels almost impossible to resist. But here is the question: how far can a man go with this power before it becomes control? At what point does attention transform into obsession? And what does it reveal about the darker corners of the human mind? Before I guide you through this, ask yourself, are you ready to learn how something as simple as a name can stir emotions stronger than touch? If you are, stay with me. When a woman hears her own name, something happens in her brain that does not happen with any other sound. It is not just recognition, it is survival. From childhood, her name has been wired into her nervous system as a signal of importance. When her parents called her, it meant safety, food, love, or sometimes danger. The brain does not let go of such signals. That is why even in a noisy room, filled with hundreds of voices, if someone says her name, her attention will snap toward it instantly. It is called the cocktail party effect, and it shows how deeply personal a name really is. But here is where things become darker. Because if something has this much power to control focus, it also has the power to control emotions. When a man says a woman's name, the brain does not only hear it. It feels it. A flood of neural activity lights up areas linked to self-image and memory. The name does not simply remind her who she is. It reminds her of how she has been seen her entire life. If he says it with warmth, she feels chosen. If he says it with coldness, she feels exposed. That is how fragile the mind becomes when faced with its own name. Consider this: if he calls her by her name at a moment when her guard is down, like in the middle of a quiet conversation, the effect multiplies. Her mind connects his voice with her sense of identity. For a brief moment, he does not feel like just another person speaking. He feels like someone who sees straight through her. That illusion of being seen is the seed of desire. Because in the hidden world of psychology, desire does not grow from looks or status. It grows from the feeling of being recognized. Every time her name is spoken, her brain lights up the same way it did when she was a child, searching for attention, comfort, or approval. The repetition of her name by a man she notices becomes a trigger that links him with safety and closeness. What begins as a simple word transforms into a signal of importance. He becomes associated with the very core of her identity. And when that connection forms, she will not even realize how much influence he now has over her emotions. Think about the danger here. A name is such a small thing, yet it can bypass all logic. A woman may tell herself that she is not attracted, that she is in control, but her own name will betray her. Because when he uses it at the right moment, the message does not enter through reason. It enters through instinct. So the first truth is this: her name is not just a sound. It is the most personal doorway into her attention, and attention is the soil where desire begins to grow. The way a man uses a woman's name matters even more than the word itself. A name is not powerful on its own. It is the tone, the timing, and the subtle pauses that give it weight. When he says her name slowly, with intention, the sound stretches across her senses. Her brain has time to soak it in. When he lowers his voice slightly while saying it, it feels private, almost secret, as if the word belongs only to them. That is where desire begins to form, not from the name itself, but from the way it is carried through sound. Consider tone for a moment. Neuroscience shows that humans are more affected by the emotional quality of a voice than by the words themselves. When he says her name with warmth, her brain connects the sound with comfort. When he says it with firmness, her brain registers strength. When he says it with curiosity, her brain feels a spark of mystery. Each tone writes a different story in her mind, but all of them leave an imprint that is difficult to erase. Then comes timing. If he says her name at a crowded dinner table, it might feel casual. But if he says it when no one else is listening, in a moment of quiet focus, the meaning transforms. Suddenly it feels intentional, almost as if he chose to see her while ignoring the world around him. That timing makes the name feel like a key, unlocking not just her attention but her emotions. Even silence has a role. When a man pauses right before or right after saying her name, the brain holds onto it longer. The pause acts like a spotlight. Her mind replays the sound, almost forcing her to focus on it more than she expected. This is not romance alone, it is psychology. The human mind pays more attention to what feels marked, separated, or emphasized. That is why a name surrounded by silence feels heavier than a name buried inside a sentence. There is also the power of contrast. If a man rarely uses her name, but then chooses the right moment to say it, the effect becomes far stronger. It feels rare, deliberate, special. But if he repeats it too often, the effect weakens. She begins to filter it out, the same way people stop noticing a repeated noise in the background. The secret is balance. Not too much, not too little. Enough to make her notice, but rare enough to make her crave it. Think of this carefully: tone, timing, and pauses are not random. They are forms of influence that bypass thought. She will not sit and analyze why his voice felt so different. She will simply feel something stir beneath the surface. And when that stirring is linked to her very name, the desire feels personal, almost fated. So, the second truth is this: a man does not create deep desire by saying her name often. He creates it by saying it in the right way, at the right time, with the right weight. Every name carries not only sound but also memory. When a man uses a woman's name, he is not simply identifying her. He is pulling on years of experiences tied to that single word. From the moment she first learned to speak, her name became a container for all the ways she has been seen, loved, corrected, praised, and judged. That is why it has such a deep hold on her emotions. The sound of her name is like a key that opens the door to her personal history. Psychologists have long understood that memory and emotion are tightly linked. If a word is tied to strong feelings, it leaves a deeper mark on the brain. Her name is the word that has been spoken with the strongest feelings since childhood, sometimes with care, sometimes with anger, sometimes with love. When a man speaks it today, he unknowingly awakens all those hidden echoes. If he says it softly, she may remember comfort. If he says it with force, her body may recall the authority of a parent. Whether she realizes it or not, her reaction to him is influenced by the weight of those old memories. This is where attraction begins to grow in ways that are hard to resist. Because if his tone connects with her positive memories, moments when she felt safe, valued, or cherished, her brain will fuse him with those same feelings. He becomes not just a man speaking her name but a figure who represents recognition and acceptance. Desire is not created out of nothing. It is built on the bridge between present and past. Her name is that bridge. Think of a simple example. A man is speaking to her in a group, but at one point he says her name in the middle of a sentence, not to call her out but to ground the words. She hears her name, and suddenly the conversation feels personal. In her mind, the entire interaction shifts. He is no longer just speaking. He is reaching for her, connecting her identity with his words. That moment becomes far more memorable than the rest of the talk. Why? Because memory clings to what feels personal. Her brain will replay the moment later, the way a song gets stuck in someone's head. This is why using her name can create lasting attraction. It is not only about attention in the present moment. It is about planting an emotional marker in her memory. When she goes home, when she is lying in bed, when her thoughts wander, she will remember the sound of her name tied to his voice. That memory grows in the silence when he is not around. And the more it repeats in her mind, the stronger the pull becomes. So, the third truth is this: her name is not just a sound that captures attention. It is a bridge to her memory. When a man ties his voice to that bridge, he does not just exist in her present. He lingers in her past and repeats in her future. Desire does not appear in a single moment. It is shaped by repetition, by the steady weaving of emotions into patterns. A woman's name, when used by a man with care, can become more than a sound. It can become a trigger. Each time he speaks it, her brain begins to link his presence with the familiar surge of recognition and emotion. Slowly, without her noticing, her nervous system builds an association. His voice equals her identity. That is the foundation of conditioning, the same psychological force that trains habits, fears, and even addictions. Think about how repetition works in everyday life. A song that you did not even like at first begins to feel addictive after hearing it several times. A place you walk through often begins to feel comfortable, even if nothing special ever happened there. The brain takes repeated signals and wires them into emotional shortcuts. A woman's name, spoken by a man, can follow the same path. If every time he says it, he adds warmth, interest, or intensity, her brain will begin to expect that feeling the next time. The name stops being neutral. It becomes charged. This is how emotional conditioning builds desire. Each repetition strengthens the bond. The more consistent the emotional tone, the more powerful the link becomes. Eventually, the sound of her own name from his lips can stir a reaction faster than she can process. It may be a rush of warmth, a sudden spark of attention, or a quiet longing she cannot explain. She may even deny it to herself, but the conditioning works beneath the surface. There is also a deeper twist. When her brain learns to connect his voice with her sense of self, removing that connection becomes difficult. Just like breaking a habit, the mind resists letting go of what has been repeated too many times. This is why desire often feels like it arrives uninvited. It is not a choice. It is the result of countless small links being built over time, until they form a chain strong enough to pull her thoughts back to him, even when she tries to push them away. But repetition alone is not enough. It must be balanced with unpredictability. If he uses her name too often, it becomes dull. The conditioning weakens. But if he uses it selectively, and then disappears for a while, the effect intensifies. The absence makes her crave the sound again. The human brain values what it misses, not what it always has. That gap, that pause between repetitions, makes the next use of her name feel heavier, sharper, more alive. This is the fourth truth: her name can become a trigger when repeated with care. Every time he says it, he leaves a small mark on her emotions. One mark means little. But hundreds of marks, spread across time, can shape the way she feels without her ever realizing why. Desire is not lightning striking from the sky. It is drops of water carving stone. Every tool of influence carries a shadow. A man who learns how to use a woman's name to create deep desire is not only walking a path of attraction, he is also walking close to the line of manipulation. Because at the heart of this method lies power, the ability to stir feelings without her full awareness. That power can connect or it can control. And the difference depends on his intent. When a man uses her name with respect, he makes her feel seen. He reminds her that she is not invisible in a world that often overlooks her. That use of influence deepens connection, builds trust, and invites desire in a natural way. But when he uses her name to corner her attention, to bend her emotions towards something she might not want, the same psychology becomes a weapon. What was once a bridge between two people turns into a chain binding one person to another. Psychology has long warned that humans are vulnerable to such subtle cues. People believe they make choices through reason, but in truth, much of human decision-making comes from instinct shaped by conditioning. A name is the most personal trigger of all. If he repeats it at the right moments, with the right tone, he can guide her attention like a hand leading her through a dark hallway. But here lies the risk: what if she begins to mistake influence for desire? What if her attraction is not truly hers, but a response programmed by his careful use of her identity? This raises an unsettling truth. The line between genuine desire and conditioned reaction is thin. On the surface, it may feel the same: a rush of excitement, a longing for his presence, a pull toward his voice. But underneath, one is born from freedom, the other from influence. The danger is not that she will desire him. The danger is that she may not know why. A man who understands this must ask himself a question: what is the purpose of this power? If it is to connect, then using her name with warmth and respect is an art of intimacy. But if it is to control, then every repetition becomes manipulation disguised as affection. And manipulation always leaves scars, even if the victim never fully understands them. So the final truth is this: the power of a name is double-edged. It can create closeness or it can create dependence. It can awaken hidden emotions or it can bend them into obedience. A man who holds this knowledge must decide whether to use it with integrity or to exploit it for control. One path builds desire that lasts because it is chosen. The other builds desire that collapses when the truth comes to light. In the end, her name is not just a sound. It is her identity. To use it is to touch her at the deepest level of self. And when someone holds another's identity in his hands, he is holding something fragile, something powerful, and something that must never be taken lightly.